Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the W4K What We Wish We Knew podcast, the podcast that talks about what we wish we knew when we were younger and what we wish we could know now that we're older. I am your host, John Sky, here with Monica O'Keefe once again. Today, we're going to be talking about what we wish we knew about mental health. Yes, we're going to go there. It might be deep, it might be difficult, but we want to talk about it. Stay tuned. We're starting now. We're going to be talking about mental health today. And specifically, I want to talk about mental health for people who are in the military, as well as maybe just your regular, everyday person at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about it because it's come up in topic and conversation on the news in the last little bit, specifically with the Department of Defense making an announcement. And then also there was a mommy blogger, one of the first really popular mommy bloggers of the early 2000s, where she had actually suffered a mental health crisis. And we'll talk about what happened.
Yeah.
So the first reason I want to talk about this is I have severe PTSD. And so it kind of hits home. And I want to make sure that by the end of this, people know that it's okay to get help.
And it's okay to have that struggle. Like
Absolutely.
Everybody's human and everybody goes through, some sort of mental health thing. Because, I don't want to say issue because it's not an issue. It's normal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we kind of want to talk about too. So one of the things that I've always been an advocate for is bringing awareness to the fact that there is a stigma with mental health. We are afraid to talk about it, or we're okay talking about it, but we're afraid to actually get the help.
And I think more so for men.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think it impacts both men and women in similar numbers. I just think we handle them differently. What are your thoughts on that?
I think culturally and societally, is that a word? Societally?
Sure. It is now.
It is now. No, I feel like men have been taught that it is a sign of weakness to ask for help. So, studies have shown that there are more females than males seeking out assistance from therapy services. So I think that has a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah. So why do you think that is? What is it that makes it so men don't want to go and seek out help? And so we end up, men do have higher risk of suicide than women. Why do you think we're afraid to get help?
Just like I said, I think it's a sign of weakness, and that's not what you're supposed to be as a man. So I think just feeling, I'm not a man, but most in my opinion, they have that struggle with asking for help and admitting that to themselves first, I think, because of that whole stigma, and then getting through that and actually asking for help.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think another part of it too is it's not just that we're afraid or it's going to remove our man card from us or anything like that. I think what it has to do with too is that we are afraid that by showing that weakness, people will use it against us. Especially in relationships.
Expound.
Oh, absolutely. So let's say, for example, you're a man and you're going through maybe some emotional trauma that happened. Maybe it was you had a bad day at work, or you got in a fight with your significant other, or maybe you're upset about something the kids did. And you're actually upset to the point where it's almost bringing you to tears. Well, if you start to cry, people will use that against you as a man. And they'll say, oh my gosh, you're weak. You can't handle that. Why are you doing that? You should be able to be strong and get through this. And it's really not an issue. So why are you making it one? And, I've had it even personally where people have used that against
That's
me.
Awful.
It is. And so instead of sharing my issues, I just say whatever. And I just try to deal with it internally. Mm-hmm. And eventually it's kind of like shaking up a soda bottle with the lid on. Like that cork is going to pop, right? And so how do we make men and women too, but how do we make men feel okay to have these problems and get help? So that kind of leads us into the military thing that I wanted to talk about.
I think for one, real quick, the way to
Go ahead.
get men to feel more comfortable with help is talking about it like we are, putting it out there and having a conversation around it. The bigger the conversation, I think the bigger impact it will have.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to talk about it, and we have to make it so it's okay to talk about. So that's a perfect segue into this. So I'm gonna share this little release here, and this was just barely May 5th, 2023. And before we go into details of this, when I was in the military, they had this what was called resilience training, and it was
I already hate the name of it.
I hated the name. We all hated the name, and the reason why we hated it is because you had two different trains of thoughts with it. So the first train of thought was, why are we doing this? This is stupid. This isn't going to solve the suicide issues in the military. And the military has more suicide than non-military, if you were to look at the percentages. And the other half of the argument was the people in the military saying, this is stupid. If you can't be resilient on your own and just man up, then what are you doing in the military? And that's the wrong attitude also. And so, as we were doing these, it was like 1 hour once a month that we'd have someone who was like the resiliency training master. He would get up and teach a class and tell us how to deal with things and sort through our issues and whatnot. And the problem was, they always said, get help. If you feel like you need help, get help. However, they're going to take away your gun or your security clearance or your ability to stay in the military.
That's effed up.
Yeah. And for a lot of us, it's our career, it's our source of income, and suddenly you take that away and it's like, no, well, I'll just be quiet about it. I won't let anyone know. And so that's why it was really nice when the Department of Defense made this announcement called the Brandon Act, which basically allows service members to seek mental health assistance or support, and they don't have to let their entire chain of command know. They don't have to get everyone involved. They can do it privately. And it's called the Brandon Act because Petty Officer Brandon Caserta died by suicide in 2018. And there's a very good chance he would have gotten help had it been okay, and he didn't have to bring the whole entire world into his mental health crisis, because that's what the military does. You don't really have privacy. So I'm really happy that they're starting to take this approach, and they're going to provide counseling, and it can be confidential, and they're going to give training for commanding officers and supervisors so that way they know how to deal with these situations. But this is a huge step forward, but it's going to take a lot of time to get rid of that stigma. So what is the stigma? The stigma is also, you're in a catch-22. The stigma is we have to keep quiet about mental health. We have to protect, in the civilian side of things, if you go and get mental health assistance, they're going to guard it with their life, hopefully, with HIPAA. They're not going to be sharing your personal details, your issues. The only way anyone can get that is if they have like a warrant or a subpoena for it. So you would have had to commit a major crime or something like that. So the problem is, adding one more story, my wife, we had to check her into a mental health institution about 1.5 years ago. And it was because some medication she was taking just made it so she kind of was in like a dreamlike state and didn't know that she didn't know what she was doing, who she was, where she was going. It was. And after almost 48 hours, no one could figure out the issue. She hadn't slept. So we checked her into a mental health facility where they could help her sleep and provide some counseling. And I'm the one who signed the paperwork. And when I checked her in, I went to go and get the information so I could visit her the next day. And they said, oh, well, we can't confirm or deny that she's here. And I'm like, well, I know she is because I can see her.
Yeah.
Like, I could see the door closing. I could see her. And they're like, well, we can't confirm if that's her. And I'm like, I signed the paperwork. And they're like, well, she's got to give you her special code words so that you can have access to her.
Are you kidding me?
And I'm like, I'm not kidding. And this
That's
drove me
crazy.
freaking nuts.
Could you imagine having to do that at the hospital?
Well, imagine if someone's out of their mind and they have to provide that code, but they can't because they don't even know who they are.
But that's the point, though, is like, why would it have to be something for like an institution for mental illness? You're getting help, right? It's the same thing for a hospital. You get checked into a hospital for some physical illness, and there's none of this around that. You can come have visitors. They don't have to have a friggin' weird ass password.
Yeah, you're right. Like pretty much anyone who's like, oh, I know the person in the ER right now. They're like, what's their name? And you say their name and they're like, okay, go ahead and see them.
But that just highlights that stigma we're talking about.
Exactly. And so how do we, I don't think that I want to, we're not going to come up with a solution today in this podcast. And I think the main thing is that what I wish people would know is that people are scared to get mental health help because of the stigma that exists around people who don't understand it. And also the people who are in the field making it so hard. I mean, these mental health facilities, you basically are in like a prison jumper, locked in a rubber room. And by rubber, I mean they've got soft furniture that can't be picked up. It's either really heavy, bolted to the floor, or whatever, so that they can't hurt themselves. But you're making this like a catch-all. So you get one person who has a severe issue and one person who has a moderate issue, and you're treating them the same like prisoners.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason people don't want to get help, because once they've gotten that help, my wife told me, she's like, if I ever have that happen again, I don't want to be checked into a mental health institution.
It just made it worse.
It made it worse. It was a nightmare. And she had to stay there for 4 days, even though she was better after she had a good night's rest. But they were like, no, we're not going to release her until Tuesday because that's when the doctor's in. And I'm like, are you kidding? You're making me pay for her to be there for 4 days. She's not getting the assistance she needs. And she feels like a prisoner. I mean, the only thing she could do is read a book or watch some TV.
That doesn't help at all. That does nothing.
No, it doesn't. And so you end up hearing all these horror stories and wondering why people don't get the help that they need. And what I wish people knew is because the help, it can derail your career. And men, especially, a lot of men, just regular civilians, non-military, we stress a lot about money. Money is what starts a lot of arguments, fights, physical and emotional and mental abuse to each other, to, spouse on spouse. And so when you're spending all this money to get help, you're just creating a bigger problem later for you. So what people result to is, okay, well, I'm just going to take my life. I can't keep up with the bills and I'll create more bills. So rather than be a burden to my family or friends, I'll just end it all.
But see, there's another issue in that as well. It's not only not feeling like supported to seek help, but there's so many other things that are going on inside. Like there's a source of shame there, right? There's a source of loneliness. There's a source of so many emotional blocks that can get in the way of even feeling capable of asking for help. And I think it's just forgetting that we're human. Like all of us are human. We all go through this, and it's not shameful. It's okay. It's okay to ask for help. You're not alone, as much as it does feel alone, right? Because I think that's a really big symptom of any mental illness is feeling alone. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it too.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, when we're feeling alone like that and we don't feel there's anyone we can turn to, it makes it very, very difficult to get out of it. And the way that I got out of it was I at least, was able to give myself a gut check and say, something's wrong. I'm not feeling good. My wife worked for a psychiatry office. She got me an appointment
Handy.
with a psychiatrist. I went, yep, it was great. And I went and met with him. And he's like, well, what can I do for you? And I was like, I don't know if there's a solution. But what I do know is I'm sleeping 3 hours a day. And that's not good. And it's just getting worse and worse. So how do I get past that? We talked, we had a chat, and, he prescribed me some medication for PTSD and depression. And it took a little bit to get used to. And now that I'm on it, I've been on it for a while, it's fantastic. Like, and I was constantly having like suicidal ideation.
That's so scary.
Yeah. And it's like, and I've been fighting it for years. And I didn't do anything when I was in the military about it because, I didn't want to lose that job, that bonus, all the things, that the perks, the healthcare, all that stuff, because that would have just wrecked me. It would have made things worse. So I want to talk about another person. And it's kind of cut off a little bit on this video, but it's mommy blogger Heather Armstrong, known as Deuce. She was a Utah mom, kind of she was one of the pioneers of being a mommy blogger. And so what is a mommy blogger? Well, it's someone who talks about their day-to-day life, challenges, struggles, whatever the case may be. She talked about challenges and relationships. And she even talked about a time when it was very hard for her to wake up each day and just keep going. And even though she knew that this was an issue, this month she ended up taking her own life. And you gotta say, how does something like that happen when you're self-aware?
And reaching out and like communicating it too. Yeah. That's the scary thing. That's the scary thing, is like, you never know what really is going on in the background with someone. And a lot of people don't even say that they are in that space, in that dark space, right? That's another tricky thing about it. So, yeah, I think it just comes back to becoming more self-aware, right? If you feel off, check in. But yeah, I think everybody gets to a point where we have to claw our ways out of it and find our own path.
Yeah. And we got to understand that ending your life is not going to make things better. It's actually going to make things worse for a lot of people.
Permanent solution for a temporary situation.
It is. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really glad that the DOD has made this change with the Brandon Act, because I think that's going to help tremendously. The other thing that I'd say, if the military ever gets a chance to listen to this, which I doubt, is, what was I going to say? Oh, if you're wondering why your soldiers are so depressed, stop automatically assuming that it's PTSD from combat. Because there's a lot of BS that you deal with in the military, even if you've never deployed. So much. They tell you to show up to an early morning formation at 5 a.m, and then you sit there for 2 hours waiting for the sun to come up, And people go, oh, well, that's not bad. They're paying you to sit there. Yeah. But now I've lost an additional couple hours of sleep. I missed the opportunity to maybe go to the gym.
Yeah. And if you're already in a mental, place, like a dark place, being there in your thoughts is not good.
Yeah. Exactly. And then they have other things. I was supposed to go to Spain because the unit that I was a part of required that you speak a foreign language. And mine was Spanish. And they would provide opportunities to improve your language. And I was supposed to go. And like 3 days before I was supposed to go, it got canceled. And I said, well, how come? And they said, oh, we didn't have enough sergeant ranked people going, so we just canceled it. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't go to my summer semester of college because I was going to do this and be gone for 3 or 4 weeks. And they said, man, that's too bad. And it's like, come on, guys, you're the ones who pitched joining the military so we could get an education and have it be paid for and things like that. And then every 5 minutes, they're changing their mind. And they wonder why soldiers get frustrated. And, there's a joke that everything is always hurry up and wait. Well, why are we waiting? If you're not ready to go, don't waste our time. We're adults. And for the quote unquote adults who still act like children in the military, if you can't be an adult in the military, then you should be fired from the military. Right?
That's logical, yes.
Yeah. And so you end up getting these soldiers who are they're fed up with everything. The system is so dysfunctional, and somehow we're this organized fighting force, and people are just losing their minds because the military, it's stupid. A lot of what you do is just stupid. I once saw a guy lose a rank. He was demoted, which means you get a pay cut, because he tipped his motorcycle over in his garage. And when he was on the motorcycle, he wasn't wearing his reflective vest, which was a requirement at the time. Anytime you're on a motorcycle, you have to have shoes that go up to and cover your ankles. You had to have long sleeves, gloves, and a helmet. And because he was just moving it from one spot in his garage to another, and it tipped over and it landed on his leg and he got hurt, the military asked him, well, were you wearing your helmet? Did you have on your reflective vest?
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me?
He's like, no, I was just moving it.
That
I'm
is
not
so
kidding.
dumb.
So imagine how depressing that is to lose a rank. And we're talking like hundreds of dollars a month, as well as now you have this permanent file that says you weren't following the rules. And they wonder why these soldiers or airmen.
Treat your people better.
Exactly. They're wondering why they're taking their life. And it's like, there's nothing to wonder about. Just be in the military. For all those policymakers that are up in Congress or the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they just need to go and be down at a local level for a few minutes and see the BS that goes on.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So, I've talked a lot. Do you have anything you'd like to kind of go over? Or?
Well, yeah, I think I think today's topic is pretty dark, and we've touched on a lot of things that I think almost everybody struggles with, and I think with going through it myself, what I wish I knew, being on the other end, is that whatever space you're in life right now, it's not forever. It may feel like it. You may not be able to mentally see any way out, but there always is. We're not in control of anything. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I think it's just a matter of pushing through in any capacity that you can every day, knowing that it will eventually get better and things will be okay.
Right. What are some things that you've done? Not just what you said, like maybe go in a little bit more detail. What are some things that you've done? I'm sure you've had times where you're like, oh my gosh, this life just sucks.
Mm-hmm.
How did you personally get beyond that? What made it so you were able to break out of that woe is me thought process and seek help?
I think one of the things, because there's a lot of different things you can do. One of them for me is coming to a point where I'm just like, I hate how I feel. And I have one life, and I don't if I have the ability to change how I'm feeling, then I'm going to do that because I'm sick of this. But another is just small steps, right? Like if you're recognizing that you're having I don't know what to call it. I don't want to say episode. What is that? Like a mental illness
Yeah, I'd just say a mental health crisis.
or whatever it is. That's okay. And you can take a step back and you can, because our feelings are not us. It's not who we are. It's not our life, but it's hard to remember that when it's like consuming you. But so yeah, just one step at a time. Three things you're grateful for every day. You're going to start feeling better. And like doing little things for you, it doesn't have to be big changes. It's just a step-by-step, day-by-day thing.
So what I was going to mention was when I was in 6th grade, I had a teacher who was very big on like saying daily affirmations.
Yes.
And when I was a 6th grader, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. But I think it works. I think you do have to, you kind of have to say, what am I good at? Why am I here? What is my purpose?
Well, words matter. Your brain, like the way we talk to ourselves in our mind matters. The words that we use matter. The way we say and talk about ourselves matter. Like affirmations, that's huge. Affirmations are big.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you're going to say them, you also have to remember, like, you got to think hard about it. Don't just say things to say things because they won't have any meaning to you. And I think also having a support system is very, very important.
Even just one.
Even just one
person.
Yeah. And don't think that because maybe you burned a bridge with someone in the past that bridge can't be mended, right? I know I've seen it with the homeless population in Utah a lot, where sometimes I have to ask, like, how did you get to that point? Because you had to burn every bridge. You had to make it so nobody wanted to house you anymore. Nobody wanted to donate clothing to you. Nobody wanted to give you food or shelter. Nobody wanted to offer you a job. So what do I wish people knew with that regard? Well, I wish we knew it's important to keep connections. It's important to try to be a decent human being. And if you are the one who's the decent human being and you see someone else struggling, find ways to help them. You don't have to go figure new things out and reinvent the wheel. If I'm struggling, maybe it's something to do with a home repair. I'd hope that I could call my brother or my dad and they'd come over and help me. I back when I was when I was recently divorced, I would go and help you with your house a lot. And that actually made me feel really good. It boosted my mental health to help you. And I would assume it helped your mental health.
My stress levels.
Your stress level. Yeah. So we got to figure out ways to have that support system and keep it, because we do run the risk of burning all of our bridges. And then we really do feel alone, and we're alone, and there's no one to help pull us out of the mud.
I've heard there have been studies on doing service for like mental health, and studies have shown that helps increase what is the chemical, the happy dopamine,
like dopamine
when you serve.
Yeah.
So service is really huge too.
Mm-hmm.
Helps us get out of our heads and out of our own like mentals.
Get out of our own mental block.
Yes.
Because we're in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a topic that I don't think that there's really like an answer.
I think just having a conversation, a conversation, being open, letting people know they're not alone, because that when you're there, it feels like you are, but we're all human. We've all been in some situation and have felt similar. And if you're open and you're honest with where you're at, like you are inviting people to help you in the way you need them. So vocalize, find a way to be vulnerable, to tell or ask for help because of what you're going through. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, if you were to, I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I say that because...
Speaking of mental illness.
I know, right? For a little bit of time, I've always had some kind of a mental health issue. It wasn't just military related. It actually stemmed from a lot of childhood trauma that I didn't even realize was trauma.
Everybody has childhood trauma, man.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that I did, as crazy as it sounds, is I listened to a lot of music of all different genres. And people said, "Oh no, you're listening to Eminem and he's an angry, bitter soul and it's going to make you worse." And I'm like,
Kids from the 90s.
yeah, right.
Yep.
I'm like, no, but I feel better listening to him, because if you actually listen to what he's saying, as ridiculous as what he's rapping about is and how absurd
Lots of
it
truth.
is,
Yeah.
well, he's speaking in hyperbole. He's
Mhm.
taking an idea and making it, and I use that word a lot, but he's taking a simple idea and he's just making it completely ridiculous. It's almost like he's a comic, like a comedian.
Yeah. But it's bringing awareness around all of that and how
Yeah.
silly some things are. Yeah.
But everyone's, "Oh, I don't like that guy and his message is bad." And it's like, read between the lines.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, I would encourage people to figure out how to find a way to alleviate some of the stress personally, as well as get help. There's nothing wrong with some chemical assistance, which comes in the forms of mental health medications. There's nothing wrong if you have that control. If maybe going out and getting a drink with a friend once a week helps your mental health. People say, "Oh no, well, alcohol is bad. It's going to make things worse." It could, but socializing could make things better, right?
Yeah.
So,
And you don't deserve to be in pain. Nobody does.
yeah.
No one deserves to sit in that. So that's another thing. Like,
And
sometimes when we're there, we feel like we do deserve it, but it's not true.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's okay to say, "I'm not okay," and tell someone. I told one of my friends, they live down in southern Utah. I drove all the way there and I was having like this mental health breakdown before I was medicated. And I just needed a hug.
Mm.
And I got a hug and they're like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay. I need to do something about this or I'm not going to make it through. Like,
Mhm.
I might not be here next year."
Oh, that's so scary.
And yeah, and and especially if you're at that point in life where you're not just having suicidal ideations, but you're actually like planning how
Mhm.
you're going to do it.
Yeah,
Like,
that's when it gets real bad. Not good.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I was making a shopping list of things I needed,
John. Ugh.
and I know it was scary.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Because I feel it's like when you're there, it's like you don't even know who you are.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's scary.
And you're just numb. You just
Mhm.
and there's still going to be people who listen to this and say, "Well, you're not resilient and you shouldn't need medicine. Go and get exercise."
Well, let me tell them that that's a stigma that we were talking about earlier.
That is
Get out of that.
exactly the stigma that we were talking about earlier.
Mic drop.
Yes, drop that mic.
But don't we need it?
No, yep, I brought it back.
Okay, cool.
There we go.
There it is.
And so, if there was anything we could get out of this, it's one, government, be better at what you're stigmatizing. Understand that you're creating a stigma. People who are anti-doctor, anti-getting help for mental health, be better and understand that people need it.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with it. And we need to stop treating it like it's this super ultra secretive thing. Just like you were saying,
Or the
we can go
super
and visit.
shameful thing, but
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah.
And when I asked the mental health facility that I had checked my wife into, like, why is it so locked down, but other things aren't? They're like, "Well, some of these people are checking themselves in and we don't want their employer to get wind of it because then they might be fired."
That's sad.
And it is. But I also have to say their employer thinks that way because you're keeping everything secret.
Because it's stigma.
Because it's the stigma
Full
we've
circle.
created.
Yeah.
Full circle. And So that's mostly what I wanted to talk about today was, I'm super happy that we're starting to make some changes, making some strides. And I'm going to bring this up again. Suicide, National Suicide, I can't talk. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline, they call it a lifeline, is 1-800-273-8255. So rewind and listen to that again if you need it, or if you're watching, it's right on your screen.
And if you want to talk to us, we're here. We're open. Leave us comments. If you want to have us talk about something like related to this, we will. We're here to help.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many different directions we can go with this topic. I could talk about it for a really, really long time and just get into finer details of different situations and things.
Maybe some episode away.
Yes.
We'll get back into it.
Exactly.
But it is a little darker, so maybe we got to do something fun next time.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a topic for next time.
Okay, but don't say it here. Tell me.
But I'm not going to say it here.
It's a surprise.
But it'll be fun.
Good.
Maybe. And weird. It'll be great.
Weird is fun. Let's do it. I'm in.
Cool. So thanks for listening. And if you guys have thoughts or comments, type them up, send them to us, leave them down in the comments, whatever. And we'll try to address them in the next podcast.
You're amazing.
And you are amazing. Bye.
Bye.